Naomi, I have never, ever started an interview this way. But you know that people call you a bitch.
Yeah?
Saying, you're not gonna have your spot, we're gonna take your money, we're gonna take your fame.
Naomi Campbell was the lone black supermodel who broke the fashion mold and reached the very top. Then, a 17-year-old named Tyra Banks stormed into Paris, and everything changed. What followed became fashion's most infamous rivalry. Two women who should have been allies, but instead were pushed into a war that left one of them in tears, calling her mother from Paris, ready to quit. And the wildest part? This wasn't just about egos. It was about an unwritten rule. The industry acted like there could only be one black supermodel at a time. While Cindy Crawford and Claudia Schiffer rose together and shared covers, Naomi and Tyra were told to fight for a single seat. Backstage clashes, shows Tyra says she was cut from, agencies forced to take sides, and words that would echo for decades. This is how fashion took two brilliant women and turned them into enemies.
And the press had cast Naomi and I as rivals before we had even met each other.
How a system built on beauty created something ugly, and how Naomi and Tyra eventually exposed the truth.
There was an unwritten rule that only one of them could be black. Only one.
By 1987, Naomi Campbell had done what no black model had achieved in decades. British Vogue hadn't featured a black woman on its cover since 1966, until Naomi. French Vogue had never put a black model on its cover, until Naomi. Yves Saint Laurent himself had to threaten to pull advertising from French Vogue to make it happen. She wasn't just breaking barriers, she was demolishing them with a sledgehammer wearing 6-inch heels. The fashion world treated Naomi's success as if it were some kind of radical experiment. When Anna Wintour put Campbell on the all-important September 1989 issue of Vogue, she later recalled that the men in suits were absolutely stunned, a measure of how tokenized black representation still was at that level. One black supermodel was revolutionary, two would be unthinkable. That was the rule nobody said out loud, but everyone understood. By 1990, Interview magazine crowned Naomi the reigning mega model of them all. She walked for Chanel, Versace, Dior, every house that mattered. But here's what the glamour shots didn't show. Naomi stood alone at the top. While Christy Turlington, Linda Evangelista, and Claudia Schiffer could all be superstars together, Naomi occupied the single spot the industry had allocated for a black model. Then, in 1991, a teenager from Los Angeles landed in Paris with big dreams and an even bigger walk. Tyra Banks was 17, fresh-faced, and about to book 25 shows in her first Paris Fashion Week, a record that made everyone pay attention. The fashion press had found their story before Tyra even unpacked her suitcase. They called her the next Naomi. Those 3 words would destroy everything. The media machine kicked into overdrive by 1992. Every article, every backstage whisper, every casting director's comment followed the same script. Look out, Naomi Campbell, here comes Tyra Banks. Nobody wrote, look out, Christy, here comes Kate Moss. Nobody said, watch your back, Claudia. But for the 2 black women breaking into fashion's highest ranks, the narrative was clear. This town wasn't big enough for both of them. Tyra genuinely worshipped Naomi. She'd studied Campbell's walk, memorized her magazine covers, dreamed of following in her footsteps. In 1992, they even shot together for Vogue. 2 black models in the same spread, a rarity worth documenting. Tyra thought she'd found a mentor, maybe even a friend. The first cracks showed backstage during Fashion Week. Tyra later recalled how the air seemed to change whenever Naomi walked into the room. The woman she idolized would look straight through her. Then came a confrontation that Banks says she never forgot. According to Tyra, Naomi approached her at a show and told her, "You'll never be me." Campbell, years later, said she didn't remember ever saying those words, but for the teenager who'd once dreamed of a mentor, the sting was unforgettable. The fashion world loves its legends, and this moment became an instant piece of mythology. Naomi would later claim she doesn't remember saying it. Tyra would spend over a decade unable to forget it. What matters isn't who remembered correctly. What matters is that an 18-year-old girl who idolized someone was made to feel like her very existence was a threat. By 1993, the Toronto Star was already reporting on the friction. The next Naomi narrative had morphed from media hype into psychological warfare. Tyra would arrive at shows excited to work, only to encounter what she later described as a campaign to make her disappear. She'd go home to her Paris apartment and cry. She was barely 20 years old. Karl Lagerfeld was reportedly given an ultimatum. According to fashion press at the time, Naomi Campbell's camp delivered a message: "If she appears, I don't." The she was Tyra Banks. Whether the threat was real or just a rumor, Banks didn't walk that Chanel show, and Campbell has never confirmed the story. This wasn't an isolated incident. Years later, elite model management founder John Casablancas claimed the tension even spilled into agency politics. At the time, both Banks and Campbell were signed to Elite, but Casablancas recalled that Campbell resisted sharing the roster. "She made me lose Tyra Banks," he told one interviewer, because she didn't feel there was room for her and Tyra at the same agency. It was one man's account, but it captured how the industry itself reinforced the idea that there could only be one.
6 agencies I went to, even back in Los Angeles, that told me no, 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 no.
Think about that power dynamic. Naomi had earned enough influence to essentially veto another model's career opportunities. She could walk into a designer's studio or an agency owner's office and make demands. That's not diva behavior. That's survival when you know you're occupying the only seat at the table reserved for someone who looks like you. Tyra found herself blocked from shows, dropped from bookings, and pushed out of her own agency. The message was consistent: you can model, just not here, not at the top, not where Naomi is. The fashion establishment, rather than making room for both women, endorsed this zero-sum game. They chose sides, and power usually won.
Oh, look out, Naomi Campbell. Here comes Tyra Banks. So Naomi Campbell, sit your butt down.
By late 1993, Tyra made a decision that would change everything. She left Elite and signed with IMG Models. If she couldn't compete in Naomi's arena, she'd find another one. But first, she called her mother and said she wanted to quit modeling entirely. The dream job had become a nightmare. Something shifted in Tyra around 1994. Her body was changing, developing the curves that haute couture despised, but America would love. European designers started dropping her from their rosters. Her agents in Milan handed her mother a list of houses that wouldn't book her anymore because she wasn't of the sample size. Tyra's mom looked at that rejection list and said something that would redirect fashion history. "You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna eat pizza." They weren't going to starve Tyra back into haute couture. They were going to find clients who wanted her exactly as she was. Meanwhile, Naomi doubled down on high fashion dominance. She remained the exception, the singular black presence on runways from Paris to Milan. But cracks were starting to show. The same intensity that helped her break barriers was creating collateral damage. Stories of explosive behavior, of assistants facing her wrath, began circulating beyond the fashion industry's inner circle. In 1996, Tyra became the first black woman to appear on the cover of GQ magazine. In 1997, she made history again as the first black woman to appear solo on the cover of Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue. That same year, she became the first black model chosen for the Victoria's Secret catalog cover. Each first was another reminder that the industry hadn't made room for black models before, and still did not make enough room now. The irony was perfect and painful. The fashion world, which had told both women there could only be one, had accidentally created two different kingdoms. Naomi ruled haute couture with an iron fist and a perfect walk. Tyra conquered the world of commercial modeling with a megawatt smile and mass appeal. They were both winning in territories the other couldn't touch. But winning doesn't heal wounds. Success doesn't erase the nights you cried in your apartment, convinced your idol hated you. Fame doesn't make you forget being forced to choose between your two biggest stars because they shared the same skin color. From 1997 to 2004, Tyra Banks and Naomi Campbell existed in parallel universes that occasionally intersected in the fashion press, but never in person. They'd perfected the art of being in the same industry without being in the same room. Tyra's universe expanded beyond modeling. She appeared on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, starred in films like Higher Learning and Coyote Ugly. She was building something bigger than a modeling career. She was becoming a brand. Every move seemed calculated to distance herself from the painful Paris years while proving she didn't need haute couture's approval to matter. Naomi's universe grew more complex. Fashion Cafe, the theme restaurant she opened with other supermodels in 1995, had shown her entrepreneurial ambitions. Tyra even attended the opening, one of their last public proximities before the silence really set in. But by 2000, Naomi's struggles were becoming headlines. She pleaded guilty to assaulting an assistant with a phone. The difficult reputation that had once been armor was becoming a liability. In a brutally honest interview with Barbara Walters in 2000, Naomi admitted the truth. "Being a bitch for me has protected me in so many ways." The fashion world had taught her that kindness meant weakness, that helping another black model meant risking your own position. She'd learned those lessons too well. The media kept the feud alive even when both women stayed silent.
It's just a fault and a defect that has to be put right, and I am trying to put it right.
Every profile of Tyra mentioned Naomi. Every Naomi controversy sparked comparisons to nice Tyra. They couldn't escape each other, even while maintaining perfect distance. Fashion writers would note tersely, "They aren't friendly," the understatement of the decade. By 2003, Tyra created America's Next Top Model. The show's premise was revolutionary. Tyra would mentor aspiring models, especially women of color, giving them the guidance she'd never received. Every episode was an implicit response to her own origin story. Where she'd faced hostility, she'd offer encouragement. Where she'd been told there was only room for one, she'd make room for many. Naomi watched from her own pinnacle as the industry slowly changed around her. More black models were emerging: Leah Kabady, Alec Weck, others who didn't have to fight quite as hard for quite as little. The only one rule was bending, though not breaking. She adapted, survived, and remained relevant, but the cost was visible to anyone who looked closely. Neither woman spoke directly about their feud during these years, but their choices spoke volumes. Tyra built an empire on inclusion. Naomi maintained her throne through sheer force of will. Both strategies worked. Both came from the same wound. In 2005, Tyra Banks did something nobody expected. She invited Naomi Campbell onto the Tyra Banks show. No studio audience, no safety net, just two women and a decade of unspoken pain. Tyra opened with words that set the stakes. Today is about telling the truth. Because without honesty, there's no way you can heal. She was 28 years old, successful beyond her teenage dreams, and still carrying wounds from when she was 18. The conversation was excruciating. Tyra, voice shaking, laid out her grievances like evidence in a trial. The Versace show exclusion, the verbal attacks, the agency pressure, each memory delivered with the precision of someone who'd replayed these moments 1,000 times. Naomi listened with a composure that seemed to frustrate Tyra more than anger would have. When accused of specific incidents, Campbell responded with variations of, "Oh my God, did I really say that?" She claimed not to remember most of what Tyra described.
I used to be when this powerful, strong icon woman that I looked up to was terrorizing me.
At one point, she even said modeling wasn't that deep for her, a statement that must have stung Tyra, for whom those early years were everything. Then, Tyra said something that changed the entire conversation. "To be honest, Naomi, I am fearful of you to this day." The admission hung in the air. Here was one of the world's most successful women admitting she was still scared of someone she hadn't really spoken to in years. That's what systematic destruction does to a person. It leaves marks that success can't erase. Naomi finally offered what Tyra had waited 13 years to hear: an apology.
Naomi, thank you so much for saying that. Because just saying that one thing, you have no idea what my heart is doing now. Thank you so much.
Not for specific incidents she claimed not to remember, but for how she'd made Tyra feel. It wasn't perfect. It might not have been complete, but it was something. They hugged at the end. Tyra would later tell her studio audience she'd cried like a baby when Naomi apologized. She finally had closure, or at least the beginning of it. The war was officially over, though neither side could really claim victory. The fashion world watched this reconciliation with fascination, perhaps even a hint of guilt. Two women they'd pitted against each other were finally saying out loud what everyone knew: the industry had set them up to fail each other. The years following 2005 should have been a clean slate, but trauma doesn't work that way. Tyra and Naomi maintained cordial relations, greeting each other at events and speaking positively in interviews, but the distance between them remained. They'd survived each other, not become friends. Tyra's America's Next Top Model ran for 24 cycles, launching careers for models of every color, size, and background. Each season felt like Tyra rewriting the rules that had nearly destroyed her. She became the mentor she'd needed, though critics would later question whether her tough love approach sometimes crossed into the same harshness she'd once endured. Naomi launched The Face in 2013, her own model competition show. The media immediately resurrected the rivalry narrative. Were they competing again? Naomi shut it down on Watch What Happens Live. There is no feud. Two women of color have to be pitted against each other? She sounded exhausted by the question, and who could blame her? But old habits die hard. In 2016, Tyra admitted she was still scared of Naomi. In 2018, she acknowledged understanding why Naomi had acted as she did, while maintaining she would never treat someone that way herself. The reconciliation had healed the wound, but left a scar. A moment in 2020 captured how unresolved everything remained. When Tyra faced backlash for her behavior on America's Next Top Model, Naomi shared an article titled, "Why Tyra Banks is the Real Mean Girl, Not Naomi Campbell." Whether it was petty satisfaction or genuine frustration, it showed that even decades later, they were still defined by their opposition to each other. Both women now acknowledge the real villain was never each other. As Naomi puts it, "You can have more than one woman of color in a fashion show." Unfortunately, back then, you could only have one. Tyra echoes this understanding, noting that the industry told Naomi, "There can only be one, and here is the new one," essentially programming her for defensiveness. They've become symbols of something larger than their personal drama. Every time a fashion magazine features multiple black models on its cover, every time a runway show celebrates diversity without tokenism, it's partly because two women were forced to fight each other, and the world watched what happened. Today, when you watch fashion weeks around the world, you'll see something that was unimaginable in 1992. Black models, Asian models, and Latino models walking together. Not one, not two, many. Each with their own campaigns, their own magazine covers, their own identities beyond being the diverse one. It's still not enough. The percentages still skew white. The pay gaps still exist. The microaggressions still happen backstage. But the rule of one, that cruel mathematics that turned Tyra Banks and Naomi Campbell into gladiators, has been broken. Both women continue to work, continue to influence, continue to exist in an industry that once insisted they couldn't. Naomi, in her 50s, still closes shows for Versace. Tyra builds businesses, creates content, and speaks about that time in her life with a mixture of pain and purpose. They transformed their rivalry into revelation, their pain into power. They forced competition into a chosen change. When young models Google their names now, they find the feud, yes. But they also see the reconciliation. They find two women who refused to let an industry's limitations define their legacy. They find proof that the battles you're forced to fight don't have to be the wars you choose to wage. The true tragedy of Tyra versus Naomi was never about two women who couldn't get along. It was about the way they were portrayed. It was about an industry that couldn't imagine them both succeeding. The true triumph isn't that they reconciled. It's that they survived long enough to see a world where their rivalry would never have existed, where a young black model in Paris doesn't have to worry about replacing anyone, where she can look at the established stars and see not rivals but predecessors, where there's room for more than one. The runway war between Tyra Banks and Naomi Campbell changed the supermodel industry, not because of who won, nobody did, But because their battle exposed a system so broken that even its most prominent stars were casualties, they were forced to fight each other when the real enemy was never in the mirror. It was in the structure, in the contracts, in the boardrooms where people decided that diversity meant one and excellence had a quota. The real tragedy isn't that they fought, it's that they had to. The real triumph isn't that they reconciled, it's that the next generation might not need to.